This is Tech and Politics, and I am Andreas Jungherr. Welcome back to the podcast accompanying the lecture series Digital Media in Politics and Society at the University of Bamberg. In this episode, we will discuss how we can observe the world through data and shape the future. Data provide a reduced representation of the world and promise to uncover hidden patterns and connections between entities that remain invisible in their full, unreduced manifestation in the world. This allows people and organizations to make sense of the world and increase their level of control. This includes the state, political parties, or companies. These actors need to understand unfolding developments, outcomes of interest, contributing factors, and have an understanding of how they are able to shape outcomes in their interest. For this, they need data. By reducing the complexity of society and the world, data make the world legible and thereby provide the opportunity for intervention. This includes rationalizing and standardizing society and the world by creating terms, concepts, and categories. Data structure entities in the world according to standardized categories, allowing actors to make sense of reality, assess problems, intervene as they see fit, and evaluate their success. But this process of making the world legible means also engaging in what Hand called pragmatic measurement. Actors have to actively and creatively translate the entities in the world into standardized and countable objects. This holds either for entities that are directly of interest to them, or those they take as signals of underlying phenomena they want to track or influence. This is a process of translation and abstraction in which meaning and details are lost. This risks overlooking or misreading important elements. Still, some sort of reduction is necessary to read and interact with society and the world. The sociologist James C. Scott illustrates this in the discussion of the work of state officials. And I quote, "Officials of the modern state assess the life of their society by a series of typifications that are always some distance from the full reality these abstractions are meant to capture. The functionary of any large organization sees the human activity that is of interest to him largely through the simplified approximations of documents and statistics. These typifications are indispensable to statecraft. State simplifications such as maps, censuses, cadastral lists, and standard units of measurement represent techniques for grasping a large and complex reality. In order for officials to be able to comprehend aspects of the ensemble, that complex reality must be reduced to schematic categories. The only way to accomplish this is to reduce an infinite array of detail to a set of categories that will facilitate summary descriptions, comparisons, and aggregation." End quote. But for this to work, the translation of society and the world into categories and numbers, quantification must validly account for the actual objects of interest and contributing elements. This makes this not an effort in simple representational measurement, but instead pragmatic measurement, foregrounding the challenges associated with the latter. This goes double for the questions of whether targeted interventions are successful or not. A correct reading depends strongly on the appropriateness of the pragmatic measurement process underlying the translation of the world into data. If the map of the territory is wrong or inaccurate, navigating by it will not lead you to your destination. Let's take campaign dashboards as an example for this. Many parties in Western democracies support their local chapters and campaigners with digital systems providing standardized solutions for voter outreach and fundraising. Services like these were first popularized by Barack Obama's campaign for the 2008 US presidential race. The campaign provided its local chapters with a centralized, web-enabled service. This allowed them to coordinate voter outreach by creating call and work lists for volunteers targeting likely voters that the Central Campaign Office had identified as promising. In the subsequent 2012 presidential race, the functionality was extended by mobile apps by which individual campaigners could log voter contacts, making them visible to campaign headquarters. Obama's success and the perceived contribution of data-enabled mobilization efforts popularized these services. In the following years, the functionality of the original services was extended, and various new services developed by vendors affiliated with other parties and in different countries. So, by now, services like these are a common feature in international campaigns and democracies, albeit with different functionalities and importance to the campaign depending on local data privacy laws, resources spent on development, and the reliance of campaigns on local voter outreach. What these services share is that they provide campaign headquarters with the opportunity to observe and shape local campaign activity more effectively than before. When in earlier times, headquarters depended on local chapters reporting back to them on how campaigning was going, these services allow headquarters to track local activities directly and to coordinate activities. By having volunteers tracking their activities, headquarters get a view in aggregate and detail of how well the campaign is going and the energy in the field. By providing local chapters with outreach priorities either targeted directly at addresses or more broadly at the street level, campaign leadership can coordinate activities according to centrally decided strategy. Digital campaign technology, therefore, clearly supports central campaign bureaucracies in collecting and aggregating data that make local campaign activities visible and allow central bureaucracies to shape them in turn. But the successful application and deployment of these services depend on more than mere technology. What are the legal conditions for campaign to collect and use data about prospective voters and volunteers? How much resources can an organization spend on development and training? How strongly does a campaign depend on local voter outreach? How high is data literacy within the organization, allowing for meaningful quantification, analysis, and subsequent action? These are some of the contextual conditions that need to be considered in trying to understand these services' contribution to campaign strategy, operations, and ultimately to electoral victory or defeat. Let's get back to our argument. One important way for organizations to observe the world and shape it is metrics-based management. Let's define metrics. Metrics are quantified measures that allow organizations the tracking, status assessment, and evaluation of predefined processes. Organizations use metrics to increase efficiency and productivity. They break down their processes in small, identifiable steps and track the achievement of these steps together with inputs and outputs. If done well, this allows for the detailed monitoring of the important processes, identification of inefficiencies, the design of interventions to improve efficiency or productivity, and central control. The idea of metrics-based management as an offspring of the Taylorist approach to scientific management. In the early 1900s, the engineer Frederick Winslow Taylor advocated the calculation of standard levels of outputs for each job contributing to factory outputs. Workers who hit these metrics or outperformed them were financially rewarded, while those who fell behind were paid less. These ideas became very popular. They were ported by US Defense Secretary Robert McNamara to quantify and track progress during the Vietnam War. They were the inspiration to metric-based management, moved into the public service sector under the term New Public Management, and recently experienced a revival in Silicon Valley tech companies under the term Objectives and Key Results, OKRs. The idea behind these schemes is usually the same. Define a set of key steps important in the pursuit of an organization's goals and track their achievement over time. By tracking inputs, such as raw material or working hours, and outputs, such as units produced, managers can supervise the process, incentivize the behavior of workers, or look for hidden inefficiencies. At least, That's the promise. In practice, management by metrics depends on the suitability of metrics covering the relevant inputs and outputs. This sounds trivial, but often what is easy to measure is not necessarily relevant, while what is relevant is not necessarily easy to measure. By failing in the pragmatic measurement process, by misconstructing measured signals, metrics-based management can lead an organization to focus on achieving metrics instead of pursuing what is necessary to produce their outputs. The fundamental problem in the measurement or quantification of society and the world, therefore, also holds in these cases. Through the greater availability and pervasiveness of data enabled by digital technology, the reach of metrics has extended. This is true for established businesses that now start to look to digital metrics in order to assess their success or failure, such as news media assessing the success of articles or journalists by the number of views or interactions they generate in digital communication environments. Or this could be actors who up until then had no access to data documenting their success or failures in real time, such as politicians or micro-celebrities. These actors also now find many digital metrics available to them, supposedly tracking their fates while providing them opportunities for interventions targeted at improving it. By a multitude of publicly visible or private metrics, digital technology provides many actors new opportunities for making legible their environment in which they pursue their goals. Unfortunately, through the simplicity and instant availability, these metrics are often not critically interrogated as to whether they actually speak to the goals of actors using them. For example, while a politician can easily track likes on Facebook, it is much harder to determine whether these likes actually correspond with preferences of her constituents. So, in the worst case, she might optimize her positions and rhetoric to the audience of her Facebook posts, while losing from sight the preferences of the people voting for her. If not used consciously and critically, metrics can easily create a quantified cage for actors relying on them. By making it easy to optimize toward them, metrics can provide the illusion of control to central authorities using them to control an organization. But while an organization might do well according to the abstract quantification of the world, metrics, its actual fate might be much less benign. As Scott points out, while an abstract map is necessary for the centralized control of complex systems, the same map can mislead controlling units, and navigating through it can lead to failures, small and large. This is just as true for metrics in the age of big data as for those coming before. Symbolic representations of the world do not only allow people and organizations to see the world, they also allow them to shape the future. Building mathematical models of the world provides new ways to form expectations about relevant future developments, as well as effects of specific actions and interventions. Having access to better models about the world allows people and organizations to position themselves with greater foresight in the world regarding future developments and effects of their actions. This allows them to outperform the competition and shape the future according to their interests. Let's define what we mean by the word model. In the given context, a model is defined as the formal expression of structure within data. While a model might represent structures between real-world entities, such a correspondence is not guaranteed. The fidelity of this representation depends on the accurate portrayal of these entities within the dataset in question. Models can be categorized as descriptive or mechanistic. Descriptive models articulate a structure found in data without making claims about causality or explaining relationships. In contrast, mechanistic models formally denote relationships between variables based on theoretical expectations. In doing so, they translate real-world theories into formal, numerical representations. Models rely on the numeric representation of the world. This allows for the mathematical identification of structures between sets of symbols. As far as these symbols provide an accurate representation of the world, structures identified through mathematics should also account for structures between the represented entities in the world. This includes the identification of relationships between variables and the entities they represent, such as their systematic co-occurrence or the presence of one entity causing that of another. For example, large online retailers can analyze buying patterns and build statistical models of which products tend to be bought together or subsequently. Of course, more interesting are models successfully identifying events or actions that cause users to buy an item. By having information about exposure to ads, click streams, or buying history, the identification of causal models might be possible as well. More generally, the same logic applies to recommender systems that point users to content or products given their own prior browsing or buying history, or that of other users that resemble them in for the model relevant features. These models allow online services, be they retailers, news sites, or content providers, to shape the information users see in ways that in the past generated outcomes of interest, be they sales, clicks, or interactions. Technology companies shape the future by structuring the digital environments users find themselves in according to insights from models. Given enough resources, data access, and dedicated personnel, other organizations can capitalize on data analysis. This includes governments, parties, or collective action organizations. Still, while the promises of data-driven practices are often proclaimed and discussed, in fact, the realization of their potential carry considerable demands in resources, analytical capabilities within an organization, quantifiable and quantified aspects of interest, and an organizational culture open to integrate data-driven insights and adjust tactics and strategy accordingly. These preconditions are much less often found or even discussed than broad speculations about data-driven promises. Accordingly, the potential of the uses of data and models are often overestimated and need to be critically interrogated for specific cases and contexts. An important feature of having models about the workings of the world, or at least that part of the world one is interested in, is that models allow to predict future developments or the effects of actions and interventions. As long as they are accurate, of course. Having accurate models about the world allows for the prediction of the future. This includes future large-scale developments, as in models of the economy or the climate, as well as future behavior of people, as in buying decisions or consumption patterns. As David J. Hand puts it, and I quote, "The mathematical model represents an understanding of how things work. And this understanding can then be used in other situations where data collection is unfeasible. Using mathematical models based on data which have been collected in simpler situations, we can produce predictions." End quote. Model-based predictions formalize knowledge gained on the basis of quantified representations of the world. They allow people, organizations, and societies to plan for the future, adjust their behaviors and actions, and potentially even shape it to their benefits. Of course, this does not mean that these predictions will always be correct, but if used diligently and in knowledge of their limitations, they can help. As a further example, let's have a look at predictions in political campaigns. Campaign organizations and political parties are also experimenting with the use of data-enabled practices and model-based predictions. Again, the Obama campaigns of 2008 and 2012 are often quoted examples that serve as template for expectations for data in politics. But, as always, it pays to look closely. Much has been made of the Obama campaign's supposed ability to identify likely voters by predicting people's vote choice based on available data. But a close study of the precision of these targeting models by Ethan Hirsch showed that the predictive power of the campaign depended strongly on the data available to it. The campaign relied on official voter files. In some states, these voter files contained information on whether a voter registered as Democrat, Republican, or Independent. Hirsch showed that in states where this data was available, the Obama campaign was able to target their outreach much more precisely than in states where these data were not available. The quality of predicting vote choice thus clearly depends on the campaign knowing the self-declared party affiliation of prospective voters. Other prediction tasks performed better, though. In their account of the Obama campaign's data-driven practices, Nickerson and colleagues show that the campaigns used experiments to generate data that allowed them to predict the best email wording to maximize donations from their supporters. Arguably, this practice allowed the Democratic Party to get too good at eliciting money from their supporters. Key consultants and commentators have been arguing that this reduction of political supporters to their likelihood to donate have led the party organization to lose sight of the more meaningful aspects of political organizing and over time has weakened the ability of the party to mobilize and count on the support of their volunteers. Despite considerable but isolated successes, quantification, modeling, and prediction might thus have come to weaken the organization in the mid to long term. Let's return to our argument. An even more elaborate use of quantified representations and models is the use of simulations. Here, models are used to simulate systems, such as societies, traffic, or human movements in confined spaces. Simulations lay at the core of product development, architecture of public spaces, and design. They're also used in the social sciences in order to test dynamics, interaction patterns, and adaptation within complex social systems. Model-based predictions allow for the development, testing, and use of new medicine and vaccines. They allow for the planting, raising, and harvesting of crop. They allow people and organizations to plan ahead and try to shape conditions according to their interests. In science, they allow the formalization, communication, and test of theories about the world, and over time contribute to improved understanding and cumulative knowledge by exposing inaccurate or wrong ideas. Models and quantification more broadly are thus the basis of modern science, business, and life, and contribute to our lives being less solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. They allow the shaping of the future, not just mere exposure to it. That's it for now. The next episode will focus on tensions that arise from the drive to generate data-enabled insights and people's expectations and rights to privacy. As always, the script to this episode can be found online on the course website, digitalmedia.andreasjungherr.de. There, you will find detailed sources, references to further reading, links, and preparatory questions for the exam. This was Tech and Politics, a podcast by the Chair for Political Science, especially Digital Transformation, at the University of Bamberg. I'm Andreas Jungherr. Have fun reading, and see you soon.